here comes the West Indies. And when you're facing the generals, nearly every ball is a funeral. And when we battle, brother, go and put your men on the boundary line. And if you give we a lick up, that is merely a hiccup. Look, you win the little battle, you lose the war. It's the same result every time. Everybody sing, here comes the West Indies. Here comes the West Indies. Them rude boys gonna get you by degrees. Here comes the West Indies. I tell you now, here comes the West Indies. Here comes the West Indies. Them bad boys gonna bring you to your knees. Here comes the West Indies. Special request to the Trinity posse. And what about the Guyana posse? And what about the Jamaica posse?
Let us put our hands together and give 3 cheers for a man so true. Clive, Lloyd, the Guyanese captain, was impressive. Julian and Roberts too. When England invited our players, they never thought such a thing would be. A super fine team of West Indian cricket masters will go down in history. Now he is the greatest one of all time. His batting and bowling was super fine. Captain of all captaincies, he brought joy to the West Indies. For the world to see, brought the credential cup to we. It took a lot of guts and professional skill. They played as West Indians should. They made every effort with power and will. The final results was good. When our wickets started to tumble, well, if you hear how West Indians fall, but when CL demonstrated the meat of the mat, the writing was on the wall. Cause he is the greatest one of all time. His batting and bowling was super fine. Captain of all captaincies, he brought joy to the West Indies. For the world to see, brought the credential cup to we. But with power and will, the final results was good. When our wickets started to tumble, well, if you hear how West Indians fall, but when CL demonstrated the meat of the mat, the writing was on the wall. Cause he is the greatest one of all time. His batting and bowling was super fine. Captain of all captaincies, he brought joy to the West Indies. For the world to see, brought the credential cup to we. Now here are some names we must never forget in the West Indian Hall of Fame. Like Lloyd, Lance Gibbs and Iwe Left, they really and truly can play the game. Hanban Holder, Keith Points and Greenwich, Murray Roberts, Fredericks, Julian, with Vivian Richards, and last but not least, Kanai and Khalid Charan. Cause he is the greatest one of all time. His batting and bowling was super fine. Captain of all captaincies, he brought joy to the West Indies. For the world to see, brought the credential cup to we. Once again, it is congratulations from Singing Francine on behalf of all. A hearty congratulations, the credential cup I come to recall. Such a magnificent performance that makes spectators jump, skip and hop. With heroes of such fame, we can always retain that famous credential cup. But he is the greatest one of all time. His batting and bowling was super fine. Captain of all captaincies, he brought joy to the West Indies for the world to see. For the credential come to be.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Welcome to this evening's edition of West Indies Cricket 101. Coming in there with Singing Francine, the sweet voice, sugary voice of Singing Francine. Paying tribute to Clive Lloyd and the West Indies team after that 1975 World Cup victory. She said he is the captain, he batted and he bowled. He bowled his full quarter, I think it was 60 overs then, and he bowled. He was a handy medium pace, so we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. And in that final, he hit that century, 103, I think, and then he bowled his quarter of overs, and he was the captain of the team. And in true West Indian spirit, Singing Francine, capturing the feelings of the people at the time in that calypso tribute to Sir Clive Lloyd. Well, he wasn't Sir then, but he's now Sir Clive Lloyd. And some of you may wonder why in cricket we don't mind talking about Sir Gary Sobers, Sir Frank Worrell, Sir Clive Lloyd, Sir Vivian Richards. It's some would say it's a colonial accolade, but as we have done with so many things that's colonial, we took them and we give them our own identity. So when we say Sir Clive Lloyd, or the Bajans used to say Sir Carl Hooper, they're not talking about no colonial sir. They're talking about a serious West Indian sir. You see? So that we have to understand that when we take these colonial terms and we give them our own meaning, we're adding a humanity to a lot of what the colonials did. Good evening and welcome to today's edition of West Indies Cricket 101. As you know, Clive Lloyd was given the honor by CARICOM, honored by CARICOM. They're our own accolade, our own sir, so to speak. And CARICOM conferring on Lloyd the great honor, the Order of CARICOM. And it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling. One of those names that has lived on, Clive Lloyd, who in many regards revolutionized West Indies cricket. If Sir Frank Worrell took us from colonialism to independence, Lloyd really took us into the period of West Indian nationalism. That during the period that Lloyd captained the team, it was a nationalist response on the cricket field. It was saying, look, when the rules are the same, we are as equal as you are, and we can beat you. We can beat you. It was West Indian nationalism on display, and so Lloyd would be associated with the period of nationalism. Of course, Sir Vivian Richards, who was in a class of his own, he gave that nationalism a radical outlook. Clive Lloyd would have mapped the nationalism, and Richards would have given it its national good. It's a way in reggae in which Bob Marley would have mapped that nationalist period of reggae music, but somebody like a Peter Tosh gave it its radical edge. And so as we remember, as we must remember, because often people say, well, what about the present and what about the future? And the present of West Indies cricket is not pleasing. But sometimes we take things out of context. For those of us who lived through the nationalist period, when we won, and won and won, and losing was not an option. We are so disappointed today. But think about the West Indian who did not live through that period, and who is now 20, 30 years old. What is happening to the West Indies team now is not necessarily so terrible. You know, comparatively speaking, those of us who are accustomed to what West Indies did in the past, we are the ones who think that what is happening on the field of play today is ultra terrible. But to the younger West Indian, it may be bad, but not so terrible. Not so terrible. And that is why if we are talking about West Indies cricket, we cannot only talk in the present. We have to link our present to our past. And what it says to us as we go forward into the future, that another West Indian cricket reality is possible. Is possible. And we've always been a people of hope. You know, there's the technical side of the game, how technically correct or incorrect you are as a batter or a bowler or a fielder. But there's also the game, as CLR James so aptly put it, cricket beyond the boundary, cricket as sociology, cricket as integration. I was speaking to some young people the other day who stopped me, and they were talking about this program, and you know, they were mentioning that Clive Lloyd got the accolade from CARICOM, and they wanted to know my take on it. And I was telling them that cricket as West Indian integration will be associated with Lloyd, because he turned the cricket field, but also turned the cricketing squad into a West Indian squad, a Trinidadian rooming with a Jamaican, a Barbadian rooming with a Antiguan, and so on and so forth. So there was a lot of that integration going on there. And often, because we have this galaxy of stars, I mean, you go back to Constantine and Headley, and you come right through to Lara and some of the others after Lara. Sometimes, you know, some people get lost, and one of the things we've been doing on this program, for example, is to bring to the fore some people. And Lloyd, because he's nestled there in between the Constantine, Headleys, the Warrill, and the W's, the three W's, and Kanai and Sobers, and he's nestled there in between them and the Richards, Greenwich, Holding, Lara especially. Sometimes he gets smothered to the point of fearing being lost. But we're going to talk about that tonight. So please share the link, please share the live. My friends are here, my brothers by now, because they're more than friends, you know, all political people. And my friends, I tell you, but I prefer to say my brothers and my sisters, right? Because it goes deeper than friends, you know, friends. So good evening to all of you. Good evening to all of you. And of course, my apologies for us missing last week because we were caught up. We had the Emancipation Symposium in Buxton, and so I was caught up, but we have passed the first part of our emancipation, and now we're back. We're back and we're ready to roll. So let's go. We're going to talk a little bit about Clive Lloyd. And those of you who've been following the match against South Africa, it ended in a draw this afternoon. And, we got through 5 days. The records will show that. Forget about how much is lost to rain. Rain is part of the story. Because if there wasn't rain on the first days, who knows? We might have bowled down South Africa for under 150. You never know. So we can't say the rain saved we. We have to figure in the rain as part of the thing. But we made it. We made it through 5 days. And that's a better feeling than to fold in 2 days as we did a month ago. All right? So thank you all very much. And let's roll. Let me bring in my brothers. Basil Butcher Jr. and Dr. Vincent Adams. Brothers, good evening.
Good evening.
Basil,
Good evening.
Basil,
Good evening, brother.
audio.
Good evening, brother. Brother David.
There you go. I love that.
Hey, and welcome to our audience again on a Sunday afternoon. Let me first of all congratulate Brother David on becoming the leader of the WPA, the presidential candidate, as a matter of fact, it was designated. So hey, El Presidente might be in order here in over a year's time from now.
It's no crime talk about politics on the cricket stage. Quite a few of our cricketers have ventured into politics. If you've been following what's happening over there in Bangladesh, they broke down what's his name? Oh, the former Bangladeshi captain. I'm trying to remember his name.
I don't know. Well, look at Imran Khan. Imran Khan is a typical example.
Yes. So there's a healthy mix between politics and Pus Akong, or Achong, or however you choose to call it. He ventured into politics. So he used to play cricket.
Good evening, Brother David, and congratulations on your ascension to the head of the WPA. But yes, remember Van Samery? He was the late Van Samery, played first class cricket for Leeward and Combined Islands. So yes, he's
as a matter of fact, Basil and I made our debut together in the same game.
Okay.
He played with he made 40 something against us. I made 40 something against them at St. Kitts. He played with a very straight bat.
Yes. And of course, we can't forget the Reverend Wes Hall, who was instrumental.
He was a senator. Same with Desmond Haynes. He also was a
yeah.
And if memory serves me correct, Worrell was a senator in Jamaica.
Worrell was a senator in
Jamaica. But even closer to home, how old Basil Butcher Senior?
Yes.
Yes. In 1997, the WPA went into with the GLP and GLP WPA citizens, and Basil was part of the GLP in 1997. We had some good talks during that time. I never know the man had such a political brain, but I should know better. You know what I mean?
Actually, Dr. Hyde, I always recall the conversation because this was like in the mid-70s, and the WPA and the turbulence that was going on in Guyana. And we driving home from Georgetown, and we on the East Bank. I never forget it. And my father turned to me and my brother right after me. We sit in the back seat. Y'all would be in about politics. And we said, no, we would not do no politics. And then he broke down to us what politics mean. Well, we had a friend that used to live across from me at Don Smart. So my father said, would you want it to be in charge? We said, not at all. He said, well, then you have to be involved in politics. And from that day, I took a very keen interest.
Dr. Adams, you were in Grenada when Clive Lloyd, and I mean, you played with Clive, and obviously you all have remained comrades and friends since that time, and you accompanied him to receive that CARICOM award. Put that award to Sir Clive in context for us, what it meant, what it means in the broad frame of Guyanese and West Indies cricket, but what it really means to Clive Lloyd as an individual, because sometimes we talk about cricketers as though they are just specimens and they're not individuals. And so, in a sense, what I'm asking you to do is to kind of humanize the award that was given to Clive Lloyd, and you were there with him. What did it mean to him as a person?
It was really, obviously, it was a very, very special occasion with all of the prime ministers within CARICOM. I never realized there were so many prime ministers within CARICOM and associate countries for CARICOM. Um, you know, I don't think it's any secret that we in the West Indies do not recognize our heroes, our cricket heroes especially. And I remember visiting with Clive a few times in England. And let me tell you, that man, he is a king in England, especially in Manchester, where he played. He played for Old Trafford, Lancashire.
Lancashire.
And he is recognized there as a king. But when he comes to the Caribbean, it's something totally different. So this year was special for him because this is a guy who dedicated himself, and we all know what he did for West Indies cricket. He, in terms of leadership and turning the West Indies cricket into the dominant force. I don't think any other cricket team had that long a reign, like on the Clive Lloyd team that Clive Lloyd team did, and it was because of his leadership, especially in the Caribbean, where you have several countries. Bring those countries together, and the whole insularity issues that we had throughout our history in picking the teams and those type of things. He did just a marvelous job. So I think it was really special to him in receiving this award in recognition of what he did for West Indies cricket. And Clive himself had a lot to do with it. He, with his brains, he revolutionized cricket, not only the West Indies, but throughout the entire world by one simple decision that he made when he went with four quicks. Did before Clive went with those four quicks, the traditional way of picking a team, two quicks, a leg spinner, an off spinner, and an all-rounder. Clive bucked the whole trend and went with four quicks, and now it's becoming something normal. If it's not four, it's three, as long as they're good bowlers to get wickets. So he was special. The only disappointment on my part, of course, was for him not to be recognized before. Sir Viv Richards and Brian Lara received the award before he did. So that was, but in any case, he took it in stride, and yeah, and received the award, and but it was special to him, regardless how big these guys get and the accolades that they get. I mean, these type of special recognition, especially from their home country, it it's more special than anything else that they receive and any other recognition that they receive outside of where they belong. So this year was, I can tell you, it was extra special for Sir Clive.
Basil, put Lloyd in context. I hinted that he lies there in between the Constantines, Headleys, coming right through to the three W's and those two pals of mine in the 50s. And then you come in the 60s and you have the Canais and Sobers and Butcher and Nurse and Hunt, Hall, Griffith. And then you have the modern superstars starting, with the Holdings and Greenwich and Richards coming through to Lara, and even down to, the Gales and others of the modern era. And Lloyd is somewhere in between there. And often, I say gets smothered. Some people argue gets overlooked. Do you share that view? And use that in a sense to contextualize Clive Lloyd's contribution to West Indian cricket.
Well, Clive was Clive was the bridge between the 60s and the teams in the what we would call the reset, because in the 70s, because the West Indies team of the 60s, he came into the team just as they had reached their peak. And then they started to go down in the late 60s as the players got older, players retired, from Hunt, Madad, Norris, Griffith, Hall. By the end of the 60s, all of these guys had gone. And if you remember, here comes India in 1971, of all teams, and beat us up. Not just beat us well in 71. New Zealand comes in 72 and draws. Australia comes and beat us in 73. We draw with England in 74. And the reset started at the end of the 74 series against England with naming Sir Clive as the captain. And, you know, the guys like the Canais and the Sobers and all of them came off the scene. And here he was, you know, he also had Gibbs there and Murray, who were holdovers from the past, and a lot of younger guys coming into the team. So he is that bridge as a leader that bridged the great 60s years and melded in and took the team as they grew to a level unprecedented in world cricket. So I think people, and more importantly, people often forget his contribution with the bat, because he's almost everybody just often talk about Clive Lloyd, the captain, but he was a major contributor also with the bat in the glory years when he was the leader of the team. I think he does not get enough credit, in my view, for that, because everybody seems to always remember him as Clive Lloyd, the great captain, and forget about his batting prowess.
And let me add quickly to what Basil said, and that's exactly what happened, because everybody, I mean, you're talking about the Worrell and them who you know, where he gets lost in the shuffle. But I believe his captaincy and the great leadership that he provided kind of dilutes his batting, or people do not pay attention to his batting. Clive's average, if you talk about the great batsmen of the West Indies, one of the first ones that comes up, of course, is his average is not up there in the 50s, Ron Kanai. And in fact, I thought that he's probably in my books, except he can't go against Gary, but I love Ron. Believe it or not, Clive and Rohan and Seymour Norris are in that category in the upper 40s, between 47 and 49 average, and Sir Frank Worrell. And a lot of greats are between 42 and 45, like Basil Butcher, Lawrence Rowe, Kali Charan, Roy Fredericks, which are great players. He's you know, his average is ahead of theirs, just to show the greatness as a batsman, as Basil said.
I would add to this about his batting, because I don't think a lot of people know this. So I want to put it even in more context. A friend of mine, a former Guyana player, one day come to me in the park. I didn't know I stats, man. And he said, Butch, I want you to check something out for me. Check Clive and Viv runs when they play together, because I believe Clive was right there with him. I said, very interesting. So I go home and I going through the thing. And to my pleasant surprise, I would tell people this. They played 16 series together. Clive outscored him 10 times. Viv ended up scoring about 200 and something more runs than Clive. But it was because of those gargantuan series, the 829 in England, the 7 and change against India and the West Indies, that put him over Clive. But overall, Clive also averaged over 50 as captain, because when he became captain, he was a 30-something average batter. And as a captain, that's again to put in context how valuable he was as a batsman, more than anything else that people forget. He averaged over 50, I think it was 53. That's why his average went from in the high 30s to the high 40s, because of what he did as a batsman during his captaincy.
And if you look at his average against India and against Australia, the place of pace like fire, and India with the spin guile. And if you look at his numbers against those teams,
but more incredible is India, because nobody would put it. Lloyd as one of the because the time when he played against India, India's primarily a spin team.
Yes, a spin
Nobody
machine.
would ever think, when people talk about the great West Indian players of spin, Clive Lloyd's name is never put in the bucket. But when you look at his performances against India in particular, he's above many of those same players that we put in the bucket. Because if thinking off the top of my head, I think it's like 69 is his
69,
average against
yes.
India. So I think
and it's not against India, outside of India.
no, both places combined.
Right.
Combined,
Yeah,
yes.
you know the other thing, Clive was ahead of his time. Basil probably hear this story, a whole bunch from me. When I was a little boy playing in one of the trials with Basil father, sitting down right next to Basil father, Clive came home for the trial. Them boys used to come home, whenever we got trials, they still used to come home to play in the trial game, to play Shell Shield. And Clive was hitting this ball over the top. And all of us were taught, you never hit the ball in the air, you hit it along the ground. And Clive was hitting it. And Basil Fad, who was sitting right next to me, said, you're looking at that. Don't you ever try that. There's only one person in the world that does that. That's the same guy who's hitting it right now. He's the only person who can do that. So don't ever try. So he was, and nowadays, hitting over the top,
That's part of the
it's
game.
become normal.
Part of the
The
game.
guy was ahead of his time, when you look at the four quicks and then you look at him as a batsman, hitting it over the top. He was, I guess, just a natural ahead of his times.
And another thing, in terms of ahead of his time, he was probably the first fielder, well, at least from my father's perspective, the first fielder to diving. Because I remember father telling me Clive was the first man. My father used the term lie down on the ground. Nobody did that before Clive. And that's another thing, younger West Indian fans who don't know this, that he was one of the best cover point fielders in the world until he injured himself in Australia. Nothing used to pass him. That's why they used to call him the Panther. But youngsters, because we don't talk about players of the past enough, so the young people could really get in context and understand these guys are not just names.
But he was a great cover point fielder in an era of great cover point fielders.
Yes.
The Keith Blands, the Paul Sheehan's, the Ross Edwards, we had Jeff Greenidge. Here in the West Indies, they were all outstanding cover point fielders. And Lloyd is seen as the greatest of them all. And now that you were talking about the diving, I mean, somebody like Bland or Sheehan, they were quick over the field, quick. But Lloyd was quick. And then he dived.
Yes.
Here, I hope Clive is listening. Let's taking some tears out of school here. So Clive was telling me how he was forced to transition from cover point and then places to slip. I think it was in Australia. He said people dropping catches like rain. The next thing you know, he's at cover point and he'd have 2 or 3 of them out to slip at cover points. So I think Gary said, wait a minute, is me the only one here in slip? So Clive, then he turned to Clive, he said, Clive, you better come and join me because nobody want to come and slip.
I think I remember. It might have been I can't remember if it was Australia or England, but Lloyd, after the injury he got, and then he reverted, coming out and going into the covers, and everybody was like pumped up because he was.
Yes, that's true, because I remember when he got injured in Australia, right? Because when he came back to Guyana, he actually came and worked. My dad got him to a job up in Linden where he was coaching. Because he used to live down the street from us. Because my youngest brother, he used to come every morning and take him to, he wasn't 4 years old yet, so he was going to this play school right across from the Mackenzie Sports Club. And I know that I saw Clive Lloyd feeling the covers at Border after the injury.
Yes.
I remember that vividly. I saw him because the injury was like 71 early 72 or whatever it was, right? Or 73 or whatever, whenever it was. But I know I saw him feeling the covers at border. And I remember every time the ball, nothing was passing him. You know, it was amazing seeing this big guy, how he could move on the field, you know? Yeah.
But the point is, and he told me that story because he said, you know, this was going around that he moved to slip because of this injury. It wasn't about the injury. You know, that was the thing about none of them boys. Clive said he was wrong.
That was a
about 3 or 4 men that Gary had to say, Clive, I guess I'm the only one who slip. I guess no, you got to come and join me.
Yeah, you know, and singing Francine in that calypso made reference to this bowling. It's forgotten that Lloyd started off as a handy leg spinner. And then when he went to England in the leagues and then later on became a handy seamer. You want to talk about a little bit about his bowling, which I think if he had bowled more could have developed into a genuine bowler, Dr. Adams?
No, I know he used to bowl a little seam thing, but with of no volume. He never used to scare anybody in case cup and stuff. But I guess when he went to England, you know, because you know, I guess he had to do that type. So no, I can't speak for his bowling at all because I've never.
But he started as a leg spinner.
Yeah, I remember when he used to throw over yarn and things.
I saw him. I remember again as a little boy. I saw him bowl against New Zealand in 72, and then again against the Australians in 73. That's the last time I saw him bowl. Those 2 times. And going back and look at the figures, he was bowling. His economy rate was very good. Yeah, he
bowled his full quarter in the World Cup.
And and then he bowled in the World Cup. But we had TV them days. We listened to it on the radio.
On the radio.
But I mean, in terms of what I saw, I remember him seeing him bowl in 72 against New Zealand, both for Guyana and in the Test match, and against Australia, both for Guyana and in the Test match for the West Indies.
But you know what? It comes from just being a great athlete. The guy was so athletic, it was unbelievable. I mean, great athletes, you just have we call it a ball sense type of thing. He was just a great athlete, and so you know, it just came natural to him.
In case you're just joining us, yes, it's West Indies Cricket 101 tonight. We're talking here about the great Sir Clive Lloyd, who was just honored by CARICOM with their highest award. Good evening to you, Sister Nima Flu Bess. Good evening to you, Colin. Good evening to my friend Orin Newton out there in Boxing. Samuel Mingo. Good evening to you, my brother. Good evening to you, Colin. Floretta, you're here. Good evening to you, Glendon. And Emily, it's good to see you again. June Griffith, good evening. Brenda Moore, good evening to you. And what warms my heart, and I suppose warms up, is the way in which women. Now this is the thing. When I was growing up, women were always into cricket, but they never went to see cricket. I mean, they would be next to their radio and they would be listening cricket. So women were always into cricket, but they never used to go to cricket. So now when we look in the stands and we see a lot of women in the stands, it's like, wow, you know. But you talk to whether it's Sir Courtney Ambrose and his mother who would ring the bell after once he get a wicket, no matter what time of day, right? And you hear cricketers, even the modern day cricketers, talk about their mothers, who really pushed them a lot. I heard Richie Richardson talk about his mother and the role she played in his career. Clive Lloyd's father died very early, and so therefore, in a sense, was raised by his mother. The women factor in our cricket, Basil.
Yeah, of course. I even could talk from personal. My mother, here with my father is a great West Indies cricketer, But the one who had more interest in my cricket was my mother more than my father. Right? So I know that just from a personal. Cause my first game I played for Upper Dem. My father wasn't coming. I was me mother forcey. I gotta go and see my son play. And they were on the way home from our store. It was lunchtime, so they came in to see me play. And my mother tell me it's me making come to see. I want to see my son play, right? So yeah, I could see how all those other guys, their mothers, you know, would have played a really important role in encouraging them, and so on and so forth. Because even I know from, again, personal experiences into my dad, his mother told him, God, this is interesting. When he first going to Georgetown, you know what the words of advice from his mother? Do not misbehave.
Vincent, your mother played any role in your career?
Well, she did everything. You know, I kind of grew up spoiled because I spent all the time practicing. I played also tennis.
You seem to be having a technical difficulty there with Vincent.
Yeah. Yes, internet.
Yes, the internet with there. In case you're just joining us, you're breaking up a little
You were
bit.
freezing there for a minute there, Vincent.
Yeah.
Your internet. You were.
Yeah.
Well, Vincent is
you're still freezing.
Wow.
Yeah. While Vincent is getting his stuff worked out there. You know, Basil, there is a theory. Well, let me walk that back because it's not a theory. There is a view that Clive was not such a great captain. He had a great team, and so all he had to do was to go on the field and they would perform. But I think those who are of that view are not looking at the science of the game, right? Because let's take the 4 fast bowlers. You had 4 different. Let's take the first 4: Roberts, Holding, Croft, and Khan.
Yeah.
There are 4 different kinds of fast bowler, 4 different fast bowler, and 4 different personalities. And if you're a captain, you have to work that out. You see, who's going to bowl to which batsman? Who's going to bowl when? Who's going to bowl? I remember when Croft took 8 for 29. I think it was against Pakistan, no?
Pakistan in 77.
In 77. And I remember us saying, take off Croft, because we were into Holding, not only we were into Roberts and so on. And they say, and Lloyd persisted with him. And as it turned out, he was the best fast bowler in our team for the conditions on that day. And so I'm saying that you may have a great team, but you still have to manage the team, manage the personalities, manage the skills. And that calls for an understanding of the game and understanding of your players. Basil Butcher.
All great captains, great coaches in sport are not only great because of their acumen of the game, because they have to have great players. If you don't have good or great players, you will not be good. Phil Jackson, look at Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson is not a great coach because Phil Jackson got the X and O's, but most importantly, he had good players. But more importantly, when you have good players, you have to manage them. And that is probably a skill where a lot of coaches or captains who are good X and O's people are lacking. And usually is that management is one of the key ingredients. One thing Sir Randy Roberts have always said to me, he said, you go and check when the 4 of us played. Clive Lloyd managed all of us because nobody was overbowled. You would see when you balance out the overs, all of them bowled similar amount of overs. You know, so that took some skill and management of the players. And I think because, you know, I mean, my first memory of Clive, I was about 3 years old. My first memory of him. right? I known him since then. This was 68 against England. Cause we traveled with the team to every game, right? And being around him on many occasions, his personality, he's a guy that could mix with the regular man in the street corner, and he could go in the halls with the big fancy highfalutin people. And he could mambo, as we would say, and one thing I know, you're a very funny guy. make you laugh all day. And that personality, and I think also, I could understand with him. He was the eldest. And when you're the eldest in the family, just by default, you have to have leadership skills to lead your siblings, right? And in his case, double whammy. His father died early, and he's the eldest, the only boy. So all of those skills came into play. He developed that came into play when he became the captain of the West Indies team. You know, it's not by accident why he was such a good leader, because he had the training from very early age.
Hey, you hear me now, Dr. Hines?
Yes, we're hearing you now. Yes,
Okay.
right there.
So you know, I think, you know, when I hear that, it's kind of disappointing, especially coming from I hear it all the time too. Dr. Hines and Basil and the audience out there, leading a cricket team is no different to leading a country or leading an organization. Okay, it's managed, because Clive could take that same team and hand it to somebody else because of their personality, because of their style of management, and they might even be more successful than he is, but they could be worse. Clive, it's not about speculation. Clive took the team, well, he didn't, you know, whatever the team he had, and he was successful. And we talk about a lot of things that he did was you know, it was something that he initiated that was never there before. So you cannot dispute his success. And again, it's, you know, when Clive, I mean, just looking at the man, when he walks into the room, first place, he looks like a giant. You know, his personality, as Basil alluded to, just his personality, you respect him. You know, he reminds me a lot, and we all know about Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. You know, somebody that just exudes that power in their presence. That's the Clive Lloyd. And he did a lot of things that to bring the team, the entire team together. Basil mentioned one in terms of sharing, you know, the bowling load with everybody, so that you can get some, you know, some are not are unhappy. But that's the kind of, and Basil talked about his stats. He led by example. His batting stats was what, 30 something when he wasn't captain. When he became captain, what happened?
50 something.
50 something. He won that World Series. I remember when he took over that not a World Series, the
World Cup.
World Cup.
Yep.
When he took over, you know, single-handedly again almost. But that's the man. So this whole thing about, well, he had a good team. As a matter of fact, to me, working with, especially with people with so much ego, that is even more difficult when you've got such a team with all this ego. If you do not have somebody to control that ego and to gel it, you're not gonna be successful.
And I remember. Yes, go ahead.
Just one quick point, and this something, because you being a political science person and very thing with the Caribbean thing. Captaining the West Indies team is a unique experience in world cricket. There is no other country, no other cricketing nation where you have people playing coming from different nation states, and obviously they're nuanced in the values and so on. Because generally our culture is the same, but we have nuances in the values and so on and so forth. So as somebody, you have to, one, get these guys from disparate parts of the Caribbean to, I mean, all of them speak with different accents. That's one, right? So we got different course words. These are the nuances and so on. And you got to understand all of these various things, how you going to package these guys as a group to get them to move in one direction. And that's why I would say we have had very few successful West Indies captains because of that. I mean, the Worrell, the Clive Lloyd are probably the two who were that epitomize that more than anybody else that has ever captained the West Indies teams.
Point well taken. And I want to remind us of a moment. I heard it on radio, but later on in the era of YouTube, you get to see it. It was in 76 when Holden and in particular, they were hammering. England had brought back clothes and these old men to take care of the West Indies. And them boys were peppering, and the umpires kept looking at Lloyd. And Lloyd, there. We hear the storm resistance all the time in politics. But for me, that was a moment of resistance. Because as a captain, you had to have a sense that this was a moment of historic proportions. Here was this stiff upper lip white male dominance, right? You didn't bring back clothes and Edrics because you just want to bring them back. You brought them back for a pop because they represented something in British culture, British sense of themselves. And I think Lloyd had the presence of mind. I don't think Holden may have understood. He was a little boy, 22 years old. But I think Lloyd understood what the theatrics of what was happening there. And they were appealing to Lloyd, stop the train, stop the train. And Lloyd stood there at slip. And later on, as you say, you now understand the politics. And you're looking at Lloyd's facial expression, his body language, and you said, this brother understood the war that was happening out there. Vince and then Basil.
No, you're absolutely correct. And it's been a privilege for me to hear a lot of those type of stories about Clive, because we look at these guys and they become great, they get all these great honors, but we do not understand the tribulations that they go throughout their entire career. Trust me, Lloyd went through a lot of it, and had it not been for his determination and focus, and deciding that nothing is going to stop him, he would not have been where he's at. But yes, and those guys played for pride. And a lot of times, you see, the thing about like Clive would tell you, like when they go to, especially playing in England, and the West Indies turn out, these people are more, because of the situation, they're living among whites in England. Of course, in the West Indies, when they're playing home, it's not as bad as losing a game in England. So they had more motivation to win in England than even winning back home, even though you don't reduce your motivation. But they had a lot of burden on their shoulders with the West Indies, not only West Indians back home, but the West Indians in England when they play in England, because that meant a lot to the black folks, the black West Indian and the Indian West Indian in England. So they had a lot on their shoulder, but a lot of people don't see those things. And what these guys went through in terms of the biases when they were playing, we thought that they were doing well, making a lot of money, but I don't think people understand. But Basil probably knows some about his dad. But those guys, this Clive Lloyd, if Clive tell you some stories about what he, the things that he went through, you would never believe. A lot of normal human beings would have given up. So
Basil, that 1976 Grozzo moment, and Holden steaming in against Brian Close, and the story goes on.
My father told me in 1963, when the West Indies team arrived, Worrell had a message for them. There were two things he said to them. One, there were only two superstars on the team, himself and Valentine, because at that time, unless you did the business in England, you were not a superstar. No. So Worrell had already made 365. Can I made separate hundreds in Australia. Gibbs had taken a hat trick in Australia. Yet, in Worrell's mind, you were not a superstar. Second thing he said, when you guys go out on the field, you're not just playing for your team. You're not just playing for the people back home, but most importantly, you're playing for them people here in England. The difference between winning and losing is when we win, them black man, as he said, could walk in to work with the chest puff up, the white man can't tell them nothing. We lose, them men guys could lose their job. Now put that in context in 76. Mr. Tony Gregg made a statement before the series. I will make them grovel. So I think that context there, that grovel is what got under the skin more so of the West Indies team, that they was gonna give it to them that entire series. And in flipping side, they made Tony Gregg grovel and the rest of the England team. So I could see in that context why Clive would stay there, stoic, and said, Holden, you keep going, my friend. I mean, later on in New Zealand, when we was getting cheap in 1980, Clive them did not go out on the field for nearly after they going for lunch. They weren't going out 45 minutes, and they had the big conference with the West Indies team. But because they were so dissatisfied with the umpiring decisions that was going against the West Indies, right? I remember watching a video where the umpire go up to Clive and Clive just stand up with the hands fold.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, almost telling you, wait, you're not doing a good job. That's why you're getting this reaction. It is because of what you were doing is causing the reaction by when Croft brushed the shoulder and Holden kicked the stumps down.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah, you know, people might argue, yeah, you ain't supposed to do that. But in the heat of the battle, when you're getting robbed so blind, human beings can respond in different ways, you know, because as I know my dad always used to tell me, whenever they went overseas, they always played against 13.
13. And there we have it. Basil Butcher Jr., Dr. Vincent Adams, we were paying tribute to the great Clive Lloyd, Sir Clive Lloyd, who was recently honored by CARICOM. And as they say, charity begins at home. Yes, he was honored by the Queen, and so he is Sir, but to be honored by your own is always special. I keep saying, I see a number of you are now coming in, and I think the 7 o'clock thing with this program is really thing. From next week, we're going to start at 7. We're going to start at 7 because people are now coming in. The 6 o'clock thing apparently not walking, right? So we're going to do 7 o'clock.
Start later.
We're going to start later.
All right.
Because they're custom, you know, the technology thing.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Because isn't your other show starting?
It's in my other show, so people automatically...
So you got the people on the schedule sometimes, and you're throwing them off on a Sunday. When they're home, they got to rush home like during the week.
But thank you, my brothers. We didn't get to talk about the just concluded drawn match, but we're going to make up for that next week.
Yeah, because we can get to talk about both games because
both games.
Started
right.
On Thursday, I think, or whatever it is. Yeah.
Good. Thank you all.
Yeah.
And to you, the audience, thank you very much. I know you all are coming in a little bit late because you're accustomed to the 7 o'clock hour. So next week, we're going to do a 7 o'clock start. Rally around the West Indies, whatever goes wrong or whatever goes right. We are a West Indian people and we have to stay with ourselves. Rex Littleford used to say, all we have is ourselves. All we have is ourselves, and we got to keep on keeping on.
Rude boys gonna get you by degrees. Here comes the West Indies. And when you're facing the generals, nearly every ball is a funeral. And when we battle, brother, go and put your men on the boundary line. And if you give we a liquor, that is merely a hiccup. Look, you win the little battle, you lose the war. It's the same result every time. Everybody sing. Here comes the West Indies. Here come the West Indies. Them rude boys gonna get you by degrees. Here come the West Indies. I'll tell you now. Here come the West Indies. Here come the West Indies. is gonna bring you to your knees. Here come the West Indies. Special request to the Trini Posse.